Joining us today on The Informed is Mario Bekic, former Military Intelligence Officer for Croatia, Caroline Council, one of Australia's leading lawyers, and Ryan Smith, the State Shadow Minister for Planning. Good morning, team.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now, we've seen some hard to understand, I'll use the term loosely, logic applied throughout this pandemic with some of the regulations, everything from the not necessary to mask prep to grade 2s, is necessary to mask grade 3 through to grade 6, and not necessary to mask year 7 through to year 12. But I think today we've got a new, I don't know whether we call it low or high, I'm not sure where we grade this, but we've seen now that the Jag Club has decided to rescind an award to somebody, Dr. Srvojevic, because he wasn't vaccinated at the time his car won the Jaguar Car Club concourse.
But was his car vaccinated?
That's not a good question.
Look, it is. Everyone's so sick of these inconsistent rules that seem to have no sense. I mean, I'm not saying anything that everyone on this panel, and I'm sure 99% of Australians or Victorians in this case would be saying, is we're just over these restrictions that make no sense. They are not any longer a part of health advice that the government continues to say they're making these orders in relation to, but we never see them. We know it's not true. It just seems unbelievable that the government's still putting these on us, and even more so that the Jaguar Car Club is using these, disconnected orders to make these sort of rulings. It's quite mad.
If I understood, he was doing this car for 7 years, and I don't understand the logic behind you strip somebody the gold medal because he's not vaccinated, and it's clearly there was no requirement to be vaccinated in order to you enter this competition and get the award. And yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. There's no consistency across the board, and I'm afraid that there's no even accountability for this because the rules are being made as we go. Anybody who is who has opportunity to enforce this vaccination status and this with the masks and everything else. I'm hearing now from this weekend here in New South Wales. Allegedly, we're gonna have no requirements anymore for people with the COVID. So I try to understand, last year, people are ending up in a prison because of the lockdowns. And this year, it's okay, walking around with the COVID. So again, there's no consistency at all, which I can't understand. Why is that?
And I've talked before about expedience, and I've talked about the politicisation. Clearly in the Jaguar Car Club, I shouldn't say clearly, I smell a rat. I smell that somebody had their nose out of joint that this guy won this award. And as I understand it, when he actually showed the vehicle, it was in public, in a park where social distancing was possible. It was in fresh air, for heaven's sakes. It wasn't in a confined environment. So I smell a rat. I smell somebody's nose out of joint, and I smell a reason why they've decided to do a double take. Clothing themselves, of course, by referring to state government guidelines, by dressing their reasoning up in the expedience of relying on the inconsistency around what it is that we're supposed to be doing and when we're supposed to be doing it. I would almost love like a slow motion camera to watch people sort of mask on, mask off, mask on, mask off, because it would make like comedy capers, I suspect, as a piece of cinematography. We've just come back from a quick trip into Queensland where we get into an Uber. We're all masked up. The Uber driver's not masked up. They've said, look, we don't need it any longer in an Uber in Queensland, only to get into an Uber the next day where the Uber driver's masked up. So I think it's Australia-wide. I think the messages are confused. And I agree, we're not surprised if most of Australians are reeling from what are we supposed to be doing, when are we supposed to be doing it. There's another serious issue also. When the message is inconsistent, the message gets ignored. That's the big problem. So there might be one decent message in all of this around health and safety that gets lost because people lose faith in the fact that it's all so inconsistent.
We've just recently seen the South Australia mandate for police removed, and I think there were 70 police that had been stood down with pay, now allowed back onto the force. We've seen the Esther just debacle where there were trained Esther operators stood down from their job because they weren't vaccinated, and we've seen the horrific outcomes from that. We've just seen New Zealand remove nearly all of their mandates, England removing the vax passport and mandates, and yet here in Victoria we've got this patchwork, nonsensical things, and now the Jaguar Car Club hiding behind, sorry, you weren't vaccinated at the time we awarded the thing. And I'm actually looking at their newsletter, and on the day there's not one mask in sight. Apparently there were no QR codes. It was in a public park that wasn't roped off. It wasn't a pay for entry or anything like that. And now to rescind it when the good doctor was kind enough to say, well, I can't attend the presentation because I'm not vaccinated. And then reading their letter, they've said, well, if you're not vaccinated now at the presentation, you obviously weren't vaccinated back in 2021 when the show was on, so we're rescinding the award. It's just madness.
Yeah, but where is the logic? Where is the logic in all? I'm sorry, Ryan, to cut you off.
No,
Where is the logic in all of this? And if this is happening on that level, when the enthusiasts, after 7 years hard, painstaking, hard work to assemble the vehicle from 1942, you take his award because he's not vaccinated, which again, I think it's a pure politicizing of this vaccination. And I truly believe that people will realize after some time, I think more time needs to go by to people realize what actually happened. And I'm afraid that we're going to watch ourselves in 10 years time on some Netflix show how ridiculous that was and how much you destroyed lives with not with the vaccine mandates, but making the rules as we go. And I feel awfully sorry for this gentleman being stripped the award because he was not vaccinated on the day when the award was being presented to him. So I'm sorry, Ronnie, please.
No, I was just going to say government needs to lead on this stuff. And I think more broadly, the reluctance of government in Victoria to have a Royal Commission into the pandemic response is just a real slight on their administration of government, because we had a Royal Commission into Black Saturday. We've had a Royal Commission into a whole myriad of different things. There is not a subject more deserving, because this issue affected every single Victorian, indeed every single Australian. If we're not at a minimum trying to work out what we did wrong, explain to people why we did what we did, there's just so many negative effects that came as a result of the pandemic and the associated restrictions that we've got to get to the bottom of it once and for all. And we've got to be able to show people that, just to renew faith in governments broadly, that these decisions that affected so many people were done with cause, or in fact they were done without cause, and that will never happen again. People need to be accountable for their actions, and at the moment the government's just not. And then we get issues like the Jaguar Club, which is small fry in the whole scheme of things, but it's just endemic in terms of the sort of mindset that some people have got after 2 years of being told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. It's got to be led by government to say, we're moving forward. We're not doing this stuff anymore. People just, they've under so much trauma of the last 2 years, they just want to move on. And while you're putting a mask on your, grade 4 kid and your dad's getting his prize stripped off him, it's nonsensical and ludicrous. And it's just so backward looking.
And inquiry should in fact be welcomed.
Yes.
Royal Commission should be welcomed. It actually gives the community an opportunity to ensure that there is a blueprint for the future where we will not revisit the sins of the past. As a lawyer, I've seen great good come out of greater accountability than would otherwise be the case in relation to royal commissions, and I've participated in a number, and it's incredibly important that, you know, the community feels that no one can make these same mistakes again. And bearing in mind, I know that emergency services, they practice this sort of stuff. They actually practice the, okay, there's a pandemic, it's just arrived at Melbourne Airport. Why can't governments practice? Why can't governments get better at governing? Why can't we learn and leverage off the experience? Because otherwise, have we just gone to hell in a handbasket for 2 years for no good outcomes, no good roadmap into the future, saying, and it's okay, it's, you know what, it's also okay to say, we didn't know what we were doing, it was right at the start, we didn't have a roadmap, or gee, we were stupid. There was actually precedents happening elsewhere in the world that we should have known about, but we're oblivious of, and we should have done better, and we apologise to the Victorian people. I don't mind an apology, provided we've got a commitment that we're never going to go back there again. I just don't see the humility coming from current government to say we got stuff wrong. And again, this is what really annoys me, and that's that whole politicisation of COVID, and everything's up for grabs in terms of it becoming a political football.
I smile because listening to the government here in Victoria, they never did anything that affected anyone negatively. So, you know, you need a royal commission because
mistakes were made. I mean, you look at the hotel debacle, for heaven's sakes. They know mistake. You look at aged care. People died on their watch. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. Different things could have been done.
When you look at
the debacle of hotel quarantine was only overshadowed by the farce of the inquiry.
Yeah. But when you look at the Victorian Ombudsman, I think Deborah Glass's report into the border closures, that is one of the most damning reports. And let's not forget, the Ombudsman isn't a political operative. This is a neutral person, and she actually called the border closures inhumane. She said in her 7 years in that job, it was the worst decisions that she had seen made. She even went on to say that it was more about finding ways to keep Victorians out of Victoria than finding and facilitating a safe way to bring them home. And so we've also seen the government fight tooth and nail to hide the advice that they say drove their decision making, rather than putting forward and say, look, we're government ministers, we're not medical experts, we don't know what we're doing, we take the advice from the experts, here it is, this is what our advice was based on. That would remove any of it. As you said, Caroline, an inquiry is the way to put this stuff to bed and go, well, here's the decisions, what they were made on, what else could we do? Because we have a lot of variance in experts. You can see it right through social media. Qualified, experienced, expert doctors that still have varying points of view on whether to mask and distance and vaccinate, and whether young children need it and older adults, and there's a wide range, but they come to a consensus and the government says, right, this is what we've chosen, here's the advice we do. You know, let the chips fall where we may. We had to make a decision, this is what it's based on. Instead, no inquiry, nothing but opaque obfuscation and hiding.
You're right, you know, like I just want to reflect something else. And during that lockdown last year, watching here from Sydney, seeing how many Victorians, you know, was all of this being done in such a rush, shut down the borders, and, you know, seeing so many Victorians stuck on the border between New South Wales and Victoria. And I couldn't understand that this is happening in the country, Australia. And being somebody who grew up in communism, I never saw such a thing. I must say, I never saw such a thing. And for that reason, I could understand that one state, it's okay. New South Wales, you know, you can go home, you can return, you can quarantine, everything else. And then suddenly have the hundreds of people stuck on a border cannot go back home. Nobody apologized. And then why I'm not surprised that Dr. Stanovsky has been stripped of his gold medal, because I believe that there was no consistency across the board. And I don't believe that doctors are different in any state. They all understand, you know, what the COVID it is, and how the pathogen works and transmissions and everything else. But yet the set of rules is being imposed between the states was horrendous. And, you know, I'm seeing right now that this affects not just a lockdown on the vaccine mandates, but that entire debacle, how it's being done and handled. As Caroline says, you know, apology is okay, but, you know, the line needs to be drawn down, and they need to, you know, I mean, not just apologize, but across the board accept the rules everywhere same equally, and people can continue with their lives. That's my, you know, my understanding of the situation so far.
And unfortunately, the government's being advised by a public service who spent the best part of the last 2 years at home and are increasingly disconnected from the people who are being affected by the decisions they're making. So, you know, we need to get those bureaucrats back to work and have them interact with people, have them interact with industry, have them talk to people who have suffered so much under the decisions that have been put forward by the bureaucracy to government. As I said earlier, you know, this whole thing needs to be led by government. Public servants back to work, an understanding of the impacts that they've had, and an inquiry to make sure, to use Carolyn's phrase, that the sins of the past are not revisited again.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah.
All right, team. Well, on that note, we'll end our cheery little discussion of the madness. It could nearly be a Faulty Towers episode wrapped up in there, where it was sort of don't mention the war.
Indeed.
Thanks very much for your time.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.